This is a story of a love triangle, a situation that often ends in heartbreak. But on this occasion, things spiraled completely out of control, culminating in the death of one of the entangled lovers. Today, we'll delve into the events that unfolded in the lives of Eloise Bagnolini, Jesse Travaglini, and Alan Castelli. In Avignon, nestled at the foot of the Mont Ventoux Mountains in France, lay a suburb of 5,000 residents. It was the charming village of Avignon, where life flowed at a leisurely pace, and the surrounding natural beauty compensated for any lack of infrastructure. Here, the Bagnolini and Castelli families resided, comprising a 5-year-old child and his parents, Eloise and Alan. They were a loving and friendly couple, known and cherished by nearly the entire local community. They were respected and respectable individuals. Neighbors often spotted a young woman in her 30s with a child in the garden by the pool. She was an attractive blonde with a gentle disposition. Eloise was quite shy, calm, and reserved, an intelligent and well-mannered woman. Above all else, she loved her family, her husband, and her child. Eloise was well-educated but didn't work, dedicating herself to household duties and rarely leaving home unless necessary. Typically, her outings were routine errands, such as a trip to the store or the school run. Her husband, Alan Costel, led a more dynamic life. He worked for a major international food company. He was a true team leader, a charismatic engineer. He was handsome and self-assured, and he exuded these qualities. Naturally, such a vibrant personality couldn't escape the attention of women. Alan had repeatedly charmed the fairer sex, who were utterly smitten with him, especially his colleagues at the company where he worked. Ultimately, this led to tragedy. On Friday, October 11th, 2013, Alan Costel was at work. During the day, he received a rather strange phone call. The teacher from his child's school contacted him. The teacher informed him that he needed to come and pick up his son, as his wife hadn't done so. Eloise had sent a message to the teacher, stating that she couldn't come due to a nervous breakdown, but didn't specify who would pick up their son from school. This struck the teacher as odd, and he tried to contact the woman, but she didn't answer the phone. He then contacted the child's father. Upon hearing the story, the husband became concerned. He knew that Eloise had no serious plans that day that would prevent her from picking up their child from school, and even if she had, she would have informed her husband. In any case, the situation seemed out of the ordinary and unlike his responsible wife, who had never acted this way before. Alan tried to contact his wife to clarify this strange situation, but she ignored all calls. A little later, the wife replied with a message, saying that she needed to go away and spend a few days alone to find peace. This already alerted Alan. He took time off work and headed home. He worried that something bad might have happened to his wife. When Alan arrived home, he found the interior in disarray and bloodstains in the bathroom, but Eloise wasn't home. The husband assumed that his wife might have been the victim of a break-in, so he contacted the police. He reported his wife missing and that there were signs of a break-in and a struggle in the house. The police immediately arrived at the family's home. After inspecting their home, investigators concluded that the situation was serious. The woman was missing, someone had broken into the house, and there was blood and disorder in the premises. Eloise was likely the victim of a crime and had been abducted. Action was needed quickly. The woman was declared missing, and a search for her began. The police noticed that Eloise's wardrobe was empty. The husband reported that he had also noticed the absence of his wife's belongings and suitcases, and that her car was also missing. The gendarmes speculated that the woman might have gone on vacation, but the husband categorically denied this scenario. His wife would never have left home, abandoning him and their child. Detectives questioned the family's nearest neighbors, but none of them had seen or heard anything suspicious that day. Unfortunately, there were no nearby surveillance cameras to check what was happening. Investigators questioned the husband, who had called the police. The man explained that he had gone to work in the morning, while his wife was preparing their son for school. He said goodbye to her. Everything was fine as usual, and there was no cause for concern. And in the afternoon, he received a call from the school, asking him to pick up his son and telling him about the wife's strange message. Alan was now sure that his wife hadn't sent the message. The kidnappers had probably sent it to buy time. Alan couldn't provide the gendarmerie with any useful information. Detectives continued the search for the missing woman and hoped she was still alive. They appealed for public help through the media, hoping that a witness would contact the police and provide valuable information about the woman's whereabouts. After a day, no information about Eloise Bagnolini was received, but by the evening of the following day, a distant neighbor of the couple, Claude, contacted the gendarmerie on another matter. The man lived a couple of 100 meters from the couple's house. He said that shortly before the woman's disappearance, he had seen an unfamiliar car in their area. The unknown car was suspiciously parked close to his house and also appeared to have been abandoned in a hurry, so the neighbor paid attention to the vehicle. The car was standing unevenly on the road, and there were no signs of the owner's activity. All this seemed strange to him, and after a day, no one had come to the car, so the man reported it to the police. Law enforcement officers arrived at the scene. Detectives inspected the suspicious car and discovered that it belonged to the missing woman. Officers opened the car to find clues inside, but instead, they found the body of 30-year-old Eloise Bagnolini in the trunk. The gendarmes were shocked, as this had never happened before in their quiet, peaceful town. It was unclear who could wish harm to an ordinary housewife who clearly wasn't involved in crime or shady dealings. The police immediately informed her husband of the gruesome discovery. The most frightening thing for Alan was that the woman had been murdered in broad daylight in their cozy suburb, where everyone knew each other, and this place had seemed to him the safest in the world. She was found in the area. She went every day to pick up her child from school. The man doubted whether this crime could be just the beginning, and that the next target would be the child or himself. These thoughts troubled him. One thing was perfectly clear. The perpetrator was still at large and had already proven to be deadly. Panic began to spread among the local residents. People were afraid to go outside and lock their doors with all the locks. To reassure the public, the police needed to solve this case urgently and put the dangerous criminal in jail before another crime occurred. At the widow's urging, the gendarmes quickly zeroed in on Jessie Travaglini, who herself was a mother and least resembled a killer. The likely perpetrator had no criminal past, worked, took care of her home and child, and was considered a decent woman. Jessie was born just 10 kilometers from Avignon. In the summer of 2001, she met a man named Jean-Francois. He was a very handsome, attractive guy. At that time, Jessie was a young 16-year-old girl, and her new boyfriend was 5 years older, 21 years old. Despite the age difference, which at that age seems quite significant, she fell in love with the guy from the first minutes of their acquaintance and realized that he was her future husband. She wasn't at all bothered by the age difference. The girl was active and assertive, and it only contributed to the active development of romantic relationships with Jean. She forgave her boyfriend all his shortcomings, smoothed out any rough edges between them. The partners really loved each other. They were very happy in the early years. A young student and a professional rugby player who spent most of his time on the field training with a perfect couple. The boyfriend was the captain of the team, who taught the novice athletes a lot and performed effectively on the field. The couple's relationship developed rapidly, so it was no surprise to anyone when they soon moved in together, and a few years later, they decided to seal their relationship with the bonds of marriage. When the girl came of age, she became pregnant. It seemed that everything was going well, but Jessie didn't have a stable job, and the athletic achievements of her boyfriend couldn't cover the growing appetite of the young family. They ran into financial difficulties. Many people reproached the couple for deciding to become parents so early, before they had even gotten on their feet. Nevertheless, the young Jessie decided that she had a reliable support in life, and that she could not work but become a housewife, and her husband should fully support the family. Gene was so in love with her that he didn't object to the young beauty. He agreed with her opinion and began working several jobs to earn a decent living and provide for his young wife all her needs. But as it turned out, it wasn't so easy because the athlete Gene didn't have a good education and faced problems with employment. All the vacancies that he met didn't suit him because of his low salary. But there was nowhere to go, and he took on everything he could. Jessie gave birth to a son and was going to take care of the household while her husband tried to earn money. However, the situation changed with the birth of the baby. Their family grew and needs increased. A lot of money went to diapers, baby food, and toys. There was not enough money at all. The young mother realized that her husband was not coping, and her activity as a housewife would not contribute to earning a large income. Therefore, Jessie began looking for work and got a job at the same company where Alan, the husband of the murdered Eloise, worked. Jessie immediately found common ground with the man, who seemed very attractive to her, and they soon started a romantic relationship. As soon as Jessie got a job at the firm, the beauty was quickly noticed. She was the person who wanted to develop and strive up the career ladder. Jessie was ready to move forward, using all her trump cards. One of them was her natural beauty. Some relatives noted that at that period she began to dress very provocatively, emphasizing her attractiveness. Of course, it was difficult for the handsome Alan to ignore this person. However, she wasn't the only one who took a liking to the young Jessie. At that moment, the young woman was 25 years old. She was tired of the poor life with her athlete husband, so she wanted more. Many men at work in the company were charmed by her beauty and courted her. However, she chose Alan Costell, who was her boss at the company. The man was attractive and respectable. They were in the same department, often crossed paths, and moved closer. In the initial period, the connection between Jessie and Alan was fraught with many doubts. Both were in long-term marital relationships and had children, so the moral side of the issue worried them. And they were also worried that rumors about their affair would soon appear in the team, and gradually the whole city and their spouses would find out about it. But they were so drawn to each other that one day they couldn't resist this attraction. Right in the office, at work, they first had an intimate relationship. The lovers discussed this event for several more days. Jessie was ready to continue their intimate relationships. However, Alan immediately made it clear that it had all happened by chance. He loved his wife and, despite everything, was not going to destroy their family. But Jessie didn't plan to give up. She intensified her pressure so that her new lover couldn't resist. Therefore, their affair continued. Despite the mental anguish, the lovers couldn't stop. They admired each other and were in love. Alan seemed like an incredibly caring, wealthy man who always supported his mistress and gave her expensive gifts. Jessie was not only beautiful and had an active and cheerful character, but also a pleasant conversationalist, with whom he found it easy to communicate. She was very pleased with the man's attention and the gifts he gave her. It was Jessie who initiated their meetings. The man was worried that he was cheating on his wife, but he didn't have the self-control to refuse his mistress. Gradually, Alan's wife became suspicious of marital infidelity due to the rumors about his affair. The woman began to notice her husband's strange behavior. One day, she followed her husband and met him in the parking lot in front of the office, from where he drove away with his mistress in his car. The wife followed the adulterer and saw him in Jessie's company while they were kissing in the parking lot. This was a real blow to her. In the evening, Eloise made claims against him because of the affair on the side. The man seemed to be very worried about it and promised to stop the sinful relationship. The wife believed him, and Alan really tried to stay away from his mistress. But Jessie didn't miss the opportunity to grab her partner right at work. She couldn't control herself. The more meetings that occurred between the lovers, the more Jessie lost control of herself. For her, Alan became a real obsession, so she started to pursue him always and everywhere. She even managed to go with him on vacation, where he went skiing with his family in the mountains. This was one of the numerous places in the mountains that are so similar to each other and where it's easy to get lost. Alan was surprised when his young mistress happened to be at the same resort and kept an eye on him all the time. This continued everywhere, as soon as Alan went somewhere on business or personal matters. How Jessie appeared there. She invariably sat at the table next to him in the cafe when they had dinner. Later, one of Jessie's friends told how she confessed to him that she was experiencing a truly irresistible attraction to her lover, wanted to leave her husband and be with him, and have children with him. She wanted to be around constantly, even just to meet eyes or talk, but he ignored her. Their affair lasted for 3 years, during which they had more than 24 contacts. However, this sinful love exhausted Alan so much, so he decided to put an end to the affair on the side and move with his family from the suburbs of Avignon, and it was supposed to go to Brittany, where they would start all over again. At this stage, the spouses Eloise and Alan were restoring their relationship after the betrayal. The wife believed him and knew that he avoided meeting his subordinate. Relations in their family improved. They dreamed of another child. During this period, Jessie learned that her boss Alan was not going to leave his family for her. She also found out that he had established a relationship with his wife, and they were not planning a second child, and most importantly, he was going to run away from her to another city to forget about her existence. For the seductress, this was a real shock. She felt deceived, betrayed, and abandoned. And the blame for everything, in her opinion, was Alan's wife, Eloise. Jessie thought that he was free from attachment to her, so sooner or later he would decide on a divorce and create new relationships. Unfortunately, her hopes didn't come true, and one day her world of illusions just collapsed. In addition, she had problems with her husband, who also learned about Jessie's infidelity and was going to divorce her. Therefore, a terrible plan to get rid of her rival, which interfered with her happiness, matured in her head. Friday, October 11th, 2013, was a beautiful autumn day. Eloise was returning from the supermarket. She had to prepare dinner for the whole family, so she was in a hurry home. Arriving, she unloaded the car and took the products to the kitchen. At that time, she was alone in the house and was going to pick up her son from school, but her plans were not destined to be fulfilled. At that moment, her husband's mistress burst into their house. Jessie confessed to her about her relationship with Alan. Eloise understood who she was and asked her to leave and not bother their family anymore. But the mistress wasn't going to leave. She was determined to solve this problem once and for all. A verbal skirmish began, but the situation quickly got out of control, after which the women clashed in a fight. Eloise quickly realized that the forces were not equal. Jessie was much stronger, and it was aggression that gave her a lot of strength. The hostess of the house saw a corridor that was free. She pushed away the mistress and rushed there. Along the way, she checked all the doorknobs to hide in any room from her pursuer. However, the only door that gave way led to the bathroom. The woman ran inside and closed herself in. Here, Eloise was in a dead end. She had nowhere to go. She didn't have a mobile phone with her to call for help. The attacker finally broke down the door and caught up with her victim. A struggle began again between them. Jessie knocked her to the floor and then began to choke her. Alan's wife was kneeling. Jessie squeezed her neck with a towel with all her might until her rival stopped showing signs of life. However, the killer didn't get confused. She decided to confuse the investigation, so she staged Eloise's voluntary departure from the house, for which she prepared several of the woman's suitcases, put things there, and loaded them into the car. Then she wrote a message to the teacher and told him about the nervous breakdown. It was after this that the teacher appealed to Colin in person, asking him to pick up his son from school. Jessie decided to divert suspicion and ease the concern of the widowed man, so she sent him a message from his wife's number on behalf of Eloise, in which she wrote that she needed to leave and spend a few days alone, supposedly necessary for a nervous breakdown, in order to find peace. However, the treacherous plan didn't end there. She just bought time, and now she had to get rid of her rival's body. Jesse parked Eloise's car in front of the house so that it was possible to carry the murdered woman into it as unobtrusively as possible. She dragged Eloise's body along the floor from the bathroom to the car and loaded it into the trunk. After that, the perpetrator got behind the wheel, drove the deceased in the trunk for about 200 meters, and then abandoned the car in the nearest parking lot near a neighboring residential complex. Here, she got rid of the victim's mobile phone and towel, with which she strangled her, as well as other compromising items that could help her during the investigation. Surprisingly, but that same evening, Jesse, as if nothing had happened, was relaxing with friends. In interrogations, these people, for the most part, said that they didn't notice anything unusual in her behavior that day. It seemed she was also having fun. Only a few noted that she looked a little more detached than usual, but this didn't cause any suspicion. Nevertheless, at that moment, the victim had been dead for a long time. A couple of days later, remorse took over Jesse. The killer went to her father's house, whom she trusted more than anyone, and told him what had happened. The man was the first to learn that Eloise Bagnolini had been murdered by his daughter. Jesse asked her father for help, describing the incident as an accident and self-defense. She sincerely believed that the deceased had attacked her, so she was forced to defend herself. Jesse's father was confused and didn't know what to do. He wanted to support his daughter, but he was also concerned about the moral side of this issue. Therefore, the man sought advice from his son, who was a police officer. As it turned out, the police were already aware that Jesse, due to her inadequate behavior, could pose a threat to the deceased and was the main suspect because the victim had no more enemies or ill-wishers. Jesse's confession allowed the gendarmes to arrest the 28-year-old killer and put her in custody. She was charged with the murder of Eloise. Now it was necessary to find out all the circumstances of the crime in order to determine whether it was a premeditated or accidental murder. From the very beginning, Jesse repented, but she claimed that she acted solely in self-defense. She came to her lover's wife to find out the relationship, but she never thought that this would lead to the death of a person. Investigators doubted the words of the perpetrator. There was careful planning and an attempt to cover up the traces. In addition, Jesse didn't even try to help her rival. She could have called the rescue service or provided first aid, but instead, she immediately began to stage an escape. However, the killer continued to convince everyone of her innocence. She claimed that Eloise had called her the evening before to arrange a meeting and discuss the situation with her husband. But this lie was immediately revealed. During the investigation, it was proven that no one had called anyone in the evening. What Jesse tried to present as an accidental death from self-defense increasingly resembled a carefully planned, premeditated murder. In addition, the perpetrator had a motive. She wanted to get rid of her wife in order to reunite with her lover. Jesse took a day off from work, October 11th. 3 weeks before that, she had purchased a stun gun with a built-in powerful flashlight. This self-defense device, which is freely available in stores. This stun gun can be used to blind, disorient, and also immobilize an opponent with a powerful electric shock. Jesse claimed that she had acquired all this for self-defense and wasn't going to use it against Eloise. The prosecution, however, believed that this was how the mistress wanted to get rid of her rival. She blinded the victim, struck her with a charge, and continued the massacre. Later, the stun gun was found in a trash can not far from the victim's car, along with the towel with which the woman had been strangled. And there were DNA and fingerprints of the killer. At the trial, everyone was concerned about the question of whether the perpetrator would confess to her premeditated crime. However, she continued to claim that Eloise had attacked her first. At the same time, no injuries or damage were found on Jesse that would indicate protection, leading to an excess of self-defense, which was strange. Therefore, her story looked extremely dubious. At the same time, forensic experts found many injuries on the victim's body. According to the forensic expert, Eloise received them when Jesse shook her. The woman lost consciousness, and her husband's mistress was so enraged that she couldn't stop and continued to shake her. Also, the forensic expert found out that the strangulation lasted for quite a long time. The attacker squeezed the victim's neck for about 5 minutes before releasing the lifeless body. Therefore, this crime can't be called a 7-minute impulse. In 5 minutes, she could well have come to her senses and stopped, but Jesse didn't do it. The prosecutor insisted that it was a carefully planned crime. The defendant had purchased the means for the attack in advance, a stun gun to immobilize the victim. She specifically took a day off from work so that she would have enough time for the crime and to conceal its traces. She pounced on Eloise in her own home and strangled her in a rage. After that, she tried to stage her escape from the house. The defense parried the prosecution's evidence. Until that moment, Jessie had never shown aggression, nor had she appeared in any criminal episode. Friends and acquaintances called her a calm, balanced, and non-conflicting woman. She was a wonderful, caring mother. According to the lawyer, this accidental murder occurred because of fear and excitement that Alan's mistress experienced. However, witnesses were found, colleagues, who described Jessie as a real predator who didn't tolerate competition in anything, neither in work nor in personal affairs. The lawyer insisted that Jessie was a victim in this story brought to despair. The defendant was under the control of her lover for about 3 years, who treated her like a thing, and she became dependent on him. Jessie loved him, and he just played with her feelings and used her. The prosecution tried to prove that this was a crime on the grounds of jealousy. The man had previously told his mistress that they couldn't have anything serious, because he loves his wife and isn't going to leave his family. This caused anger and jealousy, so Jessie couldn't cope with her feelings. She wanted to take revenge on the beloved's wife, and also to eliminate her rival. Jessie probably believed that after the death of his wife, Alan would return to her. The decisive witness at the hearings in this case was Alan Costell himself. He repeated the story of the affair with the defendant that preceded the tragedy. The man immediately understood who was behind the murder of his wife, because there was simply no one else to commit such a crime. Also, Alan added that he felt guilty for what had happened. Jessie, as it turned out, was not the only woman with whom he cheated on his wife because of his loving nature, but he never wanted everything to end so sadly. Alan continued to have a relationship with Jessie while setting conditions for her, so she just couldn't stand it over time and break down. Their relationship with the mistress continued almost until the fateful day, in particular, a month before the murder. He brought Jessie to his home, where they had an intimate relationship. The prosecution demanded the maximum punishment for the perpetrator, namely 30 years in prison, without the right to parole for the premeditated murder of Eloise. For the killer's family, it was a difficult process, as it was for herself. By the third day of the discussion, she lost consciousness from excitement. The jury couldn't decide for a long time what punishment the defendant deserved. Many agreed that this was not a premeditated murder on the basis of passion. Despite this, she was still found guilty of premeditated murder. And on February 6, 2016, the judge sentenced her to 30 years in prison. It was quite strange, given the lenient attitude towards the defendant. After that, the parents of the defendant were in shock. They simply walked out of the courtroom in silence. Jesse's lawyer spoke about his intention to appeal, as he was going to challenge this contradictory outcome. But today, the verdict remains in force. If you like my work, subscribe to the channel, support this video with a like, and let's discuss this story in the comments, and I also suggest watching these videos. Thank you all and bye.